Hi everyone, welcome to today's class. We're talking about hydration. So our little tagline is don't wait, hydrate. So my name is Abby Horton. I'm a registered nurse, a certified health and life coach, a Wellbama ambassador, and a wellness class educator. And my contact information here is for you if you have any questions or want to reach out privately about anything that we discussed today in our class. Just give me an email at abby.horton@ua.edu and I'll be happy to answer you. So our body of water, the majority of our body is made up of water. Around 75% to 80% of our actual body weight is attributed to water and other fluids. And so most of our water is actually found within the cells of our body, or what we call the intracellular space. And so we're not going to get too medical with this presentation today, but I do want you to understand why water and hydration is important. And some of the details will really help reinforce why it's important to drink water. So I call that the why behind the why. And so when we know why it's important to drink water, we're more likely to actually take time to do that. So the rest of the water that we have in our body is in the extracellular space. And so that's going to be things like your blood vessels and in between the spaces of the cells. And so that's called interstitial space. And so you don't need to know that, but I just want you to understand that water is located within the body in various parts of the body. And so that's what's important to understand your hydration status, and that's why your hydration status can fluctuate. So water does a lot for us. It helps with every production of secretions in our body. So whether it's saliva or whether it's tears or, keeping our or mucosal membranes moist, which can be located in our mouths and various other places in the body, to actually regenerating our body cells and getting rid of waste products, which is what we probably typically think about with water. It helps lubricate our joints and our muscles and our tissues, and it's really a component of every part of our cellular level. And so our brain needs it, our muscles need it, we excrete it when we're talking a lot, and so when we teach or talk a lot during the day, we need to have more water on board because we're using up more water as we're having respirations and breathing. It's a shock absorber for our body. It helps convert what we eat and what we drink in our body for digestion, and it also helps deliver oxygen to the body. And so water is a really hard worker, and it's important that we regularly are hydrating with good quality water. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the presentation. So dehydration then is important to know about as well. So we know that dehydration occurs when a lot of water is leaving the body. And that could be because you're sweating a lot. It could be because you're talking a lot. It could be because you've just had prolonged exposure. You can have medical reasons for dehydration, which we'll briefly talk about. And so we know that we routinely lose water, and so we have to routinely and consistently add water back in. And so again, water helps to humidify the air, and it helps to help cool the body. And so if we get outside and we start to sweat, that sweating is actually a protective mechanism to help us cool the body down. And then, of course, when we, have urination or bowel movements or anything like that, you're going to have that extra waste product, and you're going to have water that actually is used in that process too. And so, not to get too medical, but those are the main functions of water within the body that we think about every day. And so, we have a significant amount of water that we have to replace. And so, moving forward, thinking about our personal risk factors, we may need more water than maybe our neighbor. And so things like our age, our weight, our personal level of fitness, if we have any sort of heart-related issues or respiratory issues, certainly that's important to talk about in the context of COVID-19 and what we're experiencing right now. We can have medical conditions and other heart conditions that would, impact our overall well-being. diabetes, and then our diet. So, sugar added drinks or heavy foods or alcohol or even caffeine consumption can really increase our risk for dehydration, particularly during hot summer months in our climate in Alabama. We've had some record-breaking high temperatures in July already, and so we know that it tends to get hotter in August, and so we have to be really careful about, even while we may be working indoors, are we getting enough fluids? Because the humidity in the air can really become problematic for some people, particularly those who have sort of underlying health issues. We know that we need to have water really every hour to keep hydrated. And so personal risk factors will definitely play a role in how much water we need to consume. And that's going to vary from person to person. So we'll talk about some recommendations for how much water intake to get per day. So dehydration at a glance, again, we know the body needs it to function. We know that it's a loss of water that we are either taking in too little or we're actually using up too much water, and so we can have dehydration. And symptoms can be really mild to actually life-threatening, and so we want to make note of that. And then the first important step to actually preventing dehydration is making sure that we don't, over consume or overindulge in things that are going to use up that water, and then certainly replacing it. So prevention is the best step for actually not getting dehydrated in the first place. And then we know that people who have chronic illness or the young or elderly are going to be more susceptible to dehydration. Also, particularly right now, as we're thinking about people being outdoors more in the summer, people who work outdoors are going to be more at risk as well. And so people who might work in construction or lawn care or any outside profession that you are going to be outdoors more in the sun, for prolonged periods of time, they're going to be more susceptible to dehydration as well. So we could think about athletes, people who are doing lots of work outside, even people who are just outdoors a lot, maybe with their families now that they have some extra time maybe. And so again, facts about dehydration, most are related to heat illnesses, but we will talk about other things that are more pathological. And then we know that a person who is outdoors doing heavy work or who is really active outside can lose about 1 liter of water an hour, and we know that we're not replacing 1 liter of water an hour when we're outdoors. Most of us aren't. And so again, workers exposed to hot conditions and just not having sufficient response to water that's coming on board, maybe they're actually not realizing that they're thirsty. When we become overtired or we start to have heat exhaustion, our response for realizing that we're thirsty can actually lag behind our actual level of dehydration. And so it can be hard to catch up with that need. And then again, by the time someone's thirsty, you probably are already a little bit dehydrated. And so it's important to go ahead and hydrate before you're going to be outside, while you're outside, and then afterward you need to make sure that your hydration is appropriate to the level of activity and exposure you've had. And so it's very difficult to make up for lost time when you're actually already dehydrated, and so you may need to have more of an intervention from a medical standpoint if you get to the point where you can't get enough fluids in. And so medical causes of dehydration can be things like diabetes, because people who have diabetes have to use up more water because of the sugar that is circulating in their blood and the spikes in insulin. You can have people who have vomiting either because of an illness or because they might have some sort of underlying medical condition that causes frequent vomiting. People who have diarrhea will often have dehydration, and this is really the most common medical cause that we see. And then you can also have burns, and this could be burns like perhaps you've had an accident or injury and you have a burn. This can also be sunburns, which are really common during the summer months. So it's important to understand that. And then stroke and heat exhaustion can also play a role in medical causes of dehydration. And so we're hoping to give you some skills and some tools to make sure that you don't get to the point where you would have a medical cost for dehydration, particularly if it's just because of exposure to being outdoors and in the sun. So sweat is what we normally think about when we think about being dehydrated. Sometimes people actually can be either, so sick or so dehydrated that they don't actually sweat because your body is really great about protecting yourself. And so it really wants to keep everything that you need for life on board. And so you can actually get to the point where you get so hot or your nervous system is so impacted either because of an exposure issue or because you have an underlying medical condition that you don't sweat. So if you can walk outside and walk to your car in July and not break a sweat, then there may be something going on there. For me, I know that that's true for lots of reasons. With my particular health history, I have to be really careful because I don't always sweat in response to walking outdoors, even though it's really hot and I should be. And so people will sometimes think that's a good thing, but it's actually not what your body is designed to do. And so you want to be sweating when you're exposed to hot temperatures like 100-degree plus temperatures. You want to actually sweat because that's your body's way of cooling itself down. And so not enough sweating can be problematic, and too much sweating can be problematic when it comes to hydration. And so whether your body is hot because of the environment, or maybe it's because you're intensely exercising, or maybe you're doing like infrared saunas, which are great, or maybe you have a fever or something else is going on in the body, sweating is going to be something that you want to do, but you want to make sure that it's really controlled and that it's not excessive. And so even going outside for a brisk walk, particularly during the summer months in our climate, you can lose up to 16 ounces of sweat, which equals about 1 pound of water. And so you just really want to be cognizant of how much sweating you're actually doing and how much you're actually drinking. So while you're outside right now, you should be drinking every, few minutes and kind of checking on your temperature, making sure that you're not getting overly flushed, that you're not drenched in sweat, that sort of thing, because otherwise you need to find some shade or go inside and make sure that you're drinking some good water there. And then you can also have, like I mentioned, burns or prolonged time outside. And so the skin has that important role of regulating the fluid and the temperature in the body. And so if your skin becomes burned and it has to heal itself, you can actually have water loss because that skin is not able to protect and keep the fluids that are meant to remain in the body in the body. And then also, you can have difficulty regulating the amount of water and the actual healing when you're sunburned. So you can have a severe sunburn and still have an impact on your hydration. And then with inflammatory diseases, there are also things that can, impact your fluid and your inflammation. So when you have inflammation, that's going to definitely impact your overall hydration because it impacts the ability of blood and other fluids in the body to get where they need to go. And so you can have things like eczema or psoriasis, or even things like rashes or other things that are more difficult to manage, but there are simple things like simple skin diseases that can actually impact your hydration status. And so that when your skin starts to get dry, that you're a little bit dehydrated most likely. And so our first thought is to put on a lotion or a cream, but then also you need to reach for the water bottle as well. And so we really want to encourage you to protect your skin and use good sunscreen with SPF that's, high and rated for the type of protection that you need. Everyone is a little bit different with that. And you want to make sure that you're wearing hats and things to cover your face outside, and, things that have SPF in them, like hats and sun garments that actually will protect against the UV rays. And you can get swim guards or rash guards and other clothing, particularly if you have a risk for skin cancers or melanoma or things like that. You definitely want to make sure that you're covering your skin, particularly if you're on a beach or on the lake, or you're going to be outside doing yard work or something else, that you're not just walking in and out quickly, but you're going to be outside for a while. And that can be really important to protecting not only your skin, but also keeping you really well hydrated. So some signs of dehydration. You're going to have signs and symptoms. You can have extreme thirst. Of course, you would expect that. But you can also have dry skin, a dry mouth. Your tear ducts can be dry. Your eyes can be dry. You can have muscle cramps. You can have heart palpitations. And I listed those together because the heart is just a fancy muscle. And so if you're having, muscle cramps because you're so dehydrated, then you are likely having some issues with your heart. It may not be life endangering. It might just be some mild, heart palpitations, some mild, extra beats or a skip beat, or maybe you're having a little bit of an increased heart rate. But if your muscles are cramping to the point that it's noticeable and it's impacting you, then your heart is probably having some similar effects as well. You can have fever and chills as you're starting to get into that heat exhaustion and heat stroke. So you can start to have, kind of unusual symptoms you wouldn't think about fever and chills. You can also have, food cravings like sweets or something salty. For me, when I get dehydrated, I crave salt. And that's just a part of how the body, mechanisms work in terms of sodium and water and that relationship. And then you, of course, have headaches, which we would think about. Nausea and vomiting are certainly going to be, important symptoms. If you see those, you know that you're really needing to get some medical intervention. You can have fatigue and even sleepiness, which can go, underlooked, because if you're outside and you're hot, you're probably going to expect to be fatigued. If you're spending time on the lake or in the water or in a pool, that can really fatigue us. And so we can kind of miss that and the sleepiness as being a part of being outside and being active. So make sure you're asking good questions, especially if you have anyone who's, immunocompromised, or who has, multiple health conditions, or young children, or perhaps elderly folks with you. You want to definitely ask them good questions about how they're feeling after they've been outdoors. And then, the dry mouth and the bad breath can certainly play a role. Lightheadedness, which we would typically think about with dehydration, that's a pretty, typical common symptom that you're going to see early on. And then, of course, eventually you'll have decreased urine output, and your urine will be darker because you're trying to conserve that fluid to keep it on board so that you're not getting so dehydrated. So you would expect to see that actually, change what the urine looks like. But that's going to be a sign that you probably pick up on a little bit later. And then when we think about looking at our urine, of course, people can get so dehydrated that they actually don't have any urine output. And of course, that would require medical intervention. But your color is probably going to change, and the amount is going to change first. And so we want our urine color to be pale yellow, or what we call a straw yellow color. And as you get more dehydrated, it's going to become a darker color. And so I'll show you some images of that. Eventually, it will get to the point where it looks like it's a dark orange color. And so you know that you're going to need at least a little bit of extra water on board, as much as a liter or more, to actually become better hydrated. And you may need medical intervention depending on your particular circumstances. And so you have this image here, and it looks like a teardrop or a water drop. And so you start out being really well hydrated at the top, and that's that pale straw yellow color. So you're kind of on top of your fluids, keep it up, good work. And then you progress down, so it's a graduated color change. And so when you get a little bit darker, you know that you probably need a little bit more water, but you're still probably pretty well hydrated. And then you get to the middle, and you're moderately dehydrated because you are starting to get more concentrated urine. So you're starting to lose some of that water in your urine. And then by the time you get to the last two, you're very too seriously dehydrated because there's really not a lot of extra water in your urine, and it's more concentrated because your body's trying to conserve what little bit of water it has on board. And so a little bit more of a kind of a friendly way to look at this in terms of, something that's more common to our everyday is you can have this transparent color. So you don't want to be too hydrated either. So you can overhydrate, and that's called water toxicity. And so you don't want to get to the point where you're so overhydrated that you have symptoms from having too much water on board or having this water toxicity. So you would want to wait and hold off on the water a little bit. If you're thirsty, you could get something else to drink, a healthy alternative to water, maybe some tea or, maybe even a coffee. If it's transparent, you've got too much water on board and you may have symptoms, so look out for that. You really want a pill lemonade color urine, and that might be a little bit easier for you to imagine, or if you're sharing this with your friends and family, it might be a little bit more, manageable for them to think about telling a child that you want your urine to look like lemonade. And then you've got the middle color, which is that light beer color here, and that is where you're kind of in that moderately dehydrated level. And then when you get to amber, you're very dehydrated, and then when you get to the burnt orange color, you're severely dehydrated. And so electrolytes is something that's really helpful. You can actually get electrolytes without having a medical intervention. There are several companies and health food stores that actually sell packets of electrolytes, and I would just use those with caution and make sure that you don't have any adverse reactions to them. I personally really am susceptible to getting dehydrated, particularly during the summer months and when it's really warm outdoors, and so I do keep little electrolyte tablets that I can drop in my water, or even little packets that I can keep on hand to put in my water and mix up, and I find them to be really helpful. But you definitely just want to use those with caution and try to find a reputable brand that doesn't have a lot of additives and things like that. When you get electrolytes, sometimes they'll have things like for weight loss or, for extra energy. And really, you don't want those extra things. You want just to replace your electrolytes that have been lost. And so we can talk a little bit more about that at the end. And then when we know that we're dehydrated and we need to correct or, actually treat the dehydration, you want to try to, start with water, get water on board. You want to try clear liquids. So, you don't want to eat a large meal, because if you eat something, you may feel, jittery or shaky, especially if you have something like diabetes. Eat something that's going to have high protein and just a small snack if you need to level out your blood sugar. You can sometimes, feel like it's an issue with your blood sugar when really it's just that you're dehydrated and your body's responding in a similar way. So you don't want to eat too much, because you don't want to have to take water away from your body to digest that in your stomach, which is what it's going to do. Or it's not going to do that because it knows it's dehydrated, and then you're going to have food, food kind of just sitting on your stomach, and that's going to be really uncomfortable, and that could lead to, nausea and vomiting and make you feel even worse and lose more fluids. Popsicles are really good, especially for children. So having some popsicles handy is really helpful if you're trying to get a child to have some extra fluids on board. And then those replacement fluids like electrolytes. And so there definitely are things like Pedialyte and other, sports drinks and things. Typically, I would say, especially as an adult, to stay away from the sugary, sports drinks replacements, because the sugar that is on board really ends up making you feel worse in the long run than if you can just get electrolyte packets and drink water. But sometimes when we get so dehydrated that we feel nauseous drinking water, that's when we know we have gotten too dehydrated, and we really need to immediately take care of that. Because once your body doesn't want the water, then it's going to be difficult for you to recover from that level of dehydration without getting some extra help. But sometimes we can still get things like Pedialyte or popsicles on board and be able to help the hydration that way. So you just want to make sure that you know your body and that you keep track of how you're responding. And if something doesn't work and you continue to feel sicker, then you want to reach out for some help. Okay, so some medications that can actually increase your risk of dehydration. Allergy medicines, cold and cough medications, because those are designed to kind of dry everything up, because usually we're having a lot of, sputum or snot or just extra things, extra mucus on board. And so if you're taking those things on top of already feeling dehydrated, you're probably going to have more symptoms. You also can take things like blood pressure and heart medications, which usually have diuretics in them. So those are intended to get extra fluid off. So if you know that you're going to be working outdoors or outside for prolonged periods of time, you may want to talk to your healthcare provider who's prescribed that medication to see when it's appropriate to delay taking it, or to at least monitor, or maybe they have other suggestions that would help you with that. But particularly with heart medications, you want to make sure that you take those as prescribed and that you're working with your doctor if you see that you're having some adverse symptoms, particularly if you're outside. Most people who are on heart medications do not tolerate being outdoors for long periods of time well. And so you definitely want to monitor your heart rate and just make sure that you're approved for whatever activities you're doing and that you report those signs and symptoms. For people with blood pressure issues and blood pressure medication, they typically tolerate being outside, a little bit better than a patient who has a heart condition, but still you have to be very mindful of what you're, exposing yourself to, how long you're outside, how much you're drinking. For people with irritable bowel syndrome or bladder, issues, that definitely can be difficult with getting water on board. And of course, you're thinking about either, having bladder spasms, or with irritable bowel syndrome, you can have actual, severe bouts of diarrhea, which is going to actually increase that dehydration. Of course, anyone who's taking laxatives or certain mental health medications, seizure medications, thyroid medications, and then again, those diuretics, those are all going to draw fluid off of the body. And so that's something to really be mindful of, and to make sure that you always have a water bottle with you. And I would say maybe even an electrolyte packet with you so that you can actually pop it into your water if you do get sick. And then this is just a fun picture to remind you to make drinking water fun. You may not actually enjoy water, and so I think it's really important to make water fun. And so a program that I follow loosely is a 2B mindset, and it talks about mindful eating. And one of their, catchphrases is water first and veggies most. And so when we're thinking about making changes to our health and wellness and our nutrition, and making sure that we, are meeting our wellness goals, even during hot months like July, if we think about drinking water first and eating veggies most, and along with, our good fruits that don't have a lot of, sugar on board, then that is really a good basis for making sure that our nutrition is where it needs to be to support our bodies and to keep ourselves hydrated. And so, fruits and vegetables, especially those with high water content and low sugar content, will actually be great ways to help get some extra water in your body without actually having to drink more glasses of water. And so we want you to drink 8 to 10 glasses of water a day. So we typically say 64 ounces is what we want you to drink. But now more than ever, we're saying to drink half your body weight in ounces a day. And so if you weigh 200 pounds, then that would mean that you drink 100 ounces of water a day. And what I find is the recommendation for drinking half your body weight in ounces a day, it's typically a little more water than what a person can reasonably tolerate and feel good at that drinking level. But usually you still need a little bit more than 64 ounces, particularly if you do weigh a little bit more. And so I would say anywhere from 64 ounces to whatever half your body weight in ounces a day is probably going to be your optimal range. And so I would really suggest actually tracking your day activities and your day's intake of water, and see, okay, during these days, if I'm outdoors a lot, how much water do I feel good drinking? Where is that cutoff point for me? And then if I'm having an indoor day where I'm working a lot or I'm at my desk, then how much water do I need to drink for me to actually feel really good? And for me, I need to drink around that 72 to 80 ounces of water. If I drink close to 100, I feel like I'm floating. I feel like I'm over full on water. But if I only drink 64 ounces of water, I still don't feel completely hydrated, and I might have a little bit of a mild headache, especially if I'm really active that day or talking a lot. And so I have to learn that really just by tracking and getting to know my body. And so I would highly recommend that. It sounds simple. It seems easy to skip over, but it actually will give you a lot of good information. And so, again, just avoiding those sports drinks and energy drinks. The high sugar content and the high caffeine in some of those drinks are going to actually make you feel worse and lead to more dehydration in the long run. And then you actually want to avoid alcohol consumption, particularly if it's going to be the day of or the day before you're going to be outdoors a lot, because that alcohol can actually increase the loss of water in your body. And again, caffeinated drinks can do the same thing. So even teas, coffees, and then soft drinks or colas, like those are also going to increase your urine output because they have some diuretic qualities to them and make you dehydrate faster. And so if you plan ahead and have extra water and kind of, you know, train yourself to think about, you know, when would I need more water? What would be an obstacle to getting more water? You know, if you're going to be out at the beach or on the lake or, you know, somewhere away from home, it might be difficult to get more water. So you might actually need to take more water with you. If you're just going to be outdoors doing some yard work this weekend, then you know that you can go in and cool off and sit on the porch under a fan or by a fan, or go inside and cool off a little bit. One of my favorite ways to cool off if you're overly hot is to actually go to a sink and run water over your wrist. And so if you've got your wrist right here, if you will just turn the water on and let water, cool water, not too cold, but cool water run over your wrist, and put a damp rag around the back of your neck and kind of just loosely let it drape across your neck. Those are some good tips on how to cool off quickly. Of course, you know, there are other more extreme ways to cool off if you get too hot and you're closer to that heat stroke, heat exhaustion. But I would encourage you, you know, at that point, if you're having a lot of symptoms, again, to just reach out for some medical help because you're probably going to need it. And then making sure again that you're sweating, but that you're not sweating too much. So we want you to sweat because that's going to help cool you off, but we don't want it to be excessive. And then if you can avoid during, you know, the week or the weekend when you're thinking about being outdoors, if you can avoid the high temperatures and, you know, avoid exercising or increased outdoor exposure, plan events around cooler times of the day. So, you know, kind of that 10 to 2 or that 10 to 3 time frame is when the sun's going to be the hottest in our area, where you're going to be more likely to get dehydrated. So if you can cut the grass early in the morning or later in the evening, or if you can plan your, you know, outdoor activities, you know, trips to the park or whatever it is that you have planned for, you know, the earlier times or the later times, that will give you more of a chance to enjoy the outdoors without having increased exposure and risking that dehydration. It also will help with protecting your skin. So we know that we need about 15 to 30 minutes of good sunlight exposure a day for our vitamin D production. So we definitely want to have some sun, and we want to make sure that we're getting our vitamin D, but we want to do it in a really safe way so that we're not increasing our risk for skin cancer or dehydration. So it's all a balancing act. So some hydration tips, we want to think about setting a reminder if you're not great at remembering to drink water, or you're not great at picking up on your own body cues. You might even use an app or, you know, a notes app on your phone to track your water intake, which can be really helpful. You can habit stack. So if you sit down at your desk, you can make sure that you have water, and I have my ambassador water right here. So I always make sure that when I sit down to do anything at my desk now, really, but especially when I'm going to be recording something or teaching or on a call, I make sure I have some water with me. You might want to say, you know, when you get up to walk around your house or your office when we get back on campus, go fill your water bottle or your cup back up and drink some more. It might be that you take a sip every time you know, have a commercial break. If you still have commercials, you probably are fast forwarding through those. Just something to remind you that when I do this, then I also drink water. That's a habit stack. And that's really, really helpful for someone who gets busy or just doesn't think about the natural cues of your body. And then reusing, you know, having reusable water bottles is really helpful if you're going to be running errands or just going to be going somewhere that you don't have easy access to water. Having a cup or a water bottle can be really helpful to you. So that way you're not having to stop and get water or, go to a restaurant or wait till you get back home or back to the office. And then if you get bored with plain water, making it, really fun with fruits and vegetables and herbs and flavorings can be a fun way to get water in if you don't like the taste of plain water. Carbonated water is also really good. I have a few brands that I really like. Um, it's called Spendthrift. It's one that just has a few calories and it's all natural. It doesn't have a lot of extra flavorings and things like some of the more popular waters do. Of course, Perrier. There's lots of brands that you can get. You just want to make sure that you're checking the label, because sometimes things that are marketed as healthy waters actually have some additives in there that you don't want. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you try to switch out your caffeinated drinks. I know a lot of us here like, Cokes and Mountain Dews and Dr. Peppers and things like that. And so those can be fun and they can be treats, but you definitely want to make sure that you're not using soft drinks for hydration, because they actually dehydrate you more. So you might want to limit soda to specific days of the week, or you might want to, think about kind of tapering off on how much you drink or how many you drink or how often you drink them. And so you can go cold turkey. Some people that works really well for them. Other people really just need to set some good healthy boundaries around soft drinks and just slowly take them out of the diet. And so whatever works for you. But if you can kind of ditch soft drinks and switch to water, you definitely will see some overall health and wellness, improvements, and you'll be more likely to stay hydrated during these hot weather days. So think about that. That will definitely be a great goal for you if that's something that you struggle with. And then we can encourage you to have a water challenge. And so, a 30-day water challenge, drinking water for the next 30 days after you wake up and 30 minutes before your meal times, maybe an hour after you eat, and then maybe taking a break, in the mid-afternoon for some water. So instead of having a tea time, you can have a break for water, and then before you go to bed, having a glass of water. And so if you can't institute like all of those changes in 1 month, maybe pick having a glass of water in the morning and a glass of water at night. There have been research studies that have been done that talk about having good hydration before bedtime is so essential to good sleep. So having some water before bed might help. I know a lot of people don't drink before they go to bed because they think about having to wake up in the middle of the night. So that may not be something that you can do, but if you can do it, you might want to try it and see. I've started drinking water more even up until bedtime, and I haven't noticed a problem with that, but everyone's different. So just pick something that works for you and try it, and try to track your water for the next 30 days, even if you don't do these other things, and see if you notice a difference in your hydration level and just your overall, energy levels. You should see some improvements there. And then we want to talk about some upcoming July classes. So we know that our health is so important. After 40, we do have some changes. And so this is one of our most popular talks. And so we would love to have you join this. And so this is going to be our last, July 29th, our last class of the July month. So please join us if you're interested. You don't have to be 40. You can just be wanting to talk about health over 40 if you're approaching that. We also have some social media channels that we would love for you to check out. There's more information on our new blog, and so for every class that we teach for Wellbama, we actually are going to have a blog post for that. And so there are some more tips and information and resources, and there's some here for the Don't Wait, Hydrate class. So please check that out and give us some feedback on the blog. We would love to have your participation there. And then we want to let you know that we still have COVID-19 coping resources on the hrua.edu website, so you can use this address here. We also have health and life coaching, which is available and free for any UA employees. And so I actually do those appointments. And so if you would like more information or would you like to schedule an appointment for health and wellness coaching, we would love to have you. And so just email me at abby.horton@ua.edu, and we would be happy to make an appointment that works with your schedule. So I'm going to open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions or comments. We would love to hear from you. Carolyn says it's been one of the hottest days so far. It is. It is a very hot and humid day with more hot days expected. All right. Well, I don't see any other comments or questions. So I just want to thank y'all for coming today. Just remember to, drink your water early and often. Always have something on hand so that you can get some hydration in and make it fun. And just remember to, utilize your resources, whether it's, getting a water bottle that you really love to carry around, or, whether it's a fun-free app that you can download on your phone to track your water intake. Just make it fun so that you enjoy being hydrated and you enjoy keeping tabs on your health and wellness, because otherwise you're probably going to just let the habit fall. When you have other things going on, we don't always stop and think about simple things like sleep and hydration. So any little baby steps that you can take to make your, body a little healthier, a little happier, is always a good thing to do, and making it fun and simple is always the best approach. So I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Y'all go get some water and y'all try to stay cool out there. Talk to you later.